sleepy rural town of Princeton, Ohio, the horizon was defined by rolling fields of corn, wheat, and the occasional line of ancient oaks that cast long, narrow shadows over the landscape. The people here lived simple lives, rising with the sun and working their fields until dusk. Farm equipment hummed in the distance, a steady, rhythmic drum that had become as familiar as the wind. It was a life of predictable calm, but one summer that silence was shattered by something no one could have predicted. It began with a strange unease, subtle at first, like a cloud that lingered just a little too long overhead. The local wildlife seemed skittish, more elusive than usual. Deer that had once grazed near the tree lines disappeared entirely, and the usual chatter of birds was muted. Most of the farmers wrote it off as a sign of the approaching harvest season when the animals moved on to quieter territories, but the bobcats remained. June 5th was a typical evening for Don Hargrove, who had spent the day repairing his old tractor. The machine had been acting up for weeks, and Don had finally set aside the time to fix it. As the sun dipped below the horizon, he fired up the tractor's engine, a loud machine chug echoing across his property. He worked late, the drone of the machine breaking the quiet night. It wasn't until his wife, Kathy, stepped outside to call him in for supper that anyone noticed something was wrong. She found Don lying on the ground near the tractor, his face a twisted mask of terror. His throat had been torn open, and his body was covered in deep claw marks. A trail of blood led away from him, vanishing into the darkness beyond. The next morning, the town was shaken by the news of Don's gruesome death. Sheriff Reynolds, a man known for his level-headedness, examined the scene with a grim expression. As he scoured the area for clues, he found no tracks or signs of struggle, just the mangled remains of a once lively man. Rumors quickly spread through Princeton. Some whispered of wild dogs, others spoke of a serial killer on the loose. Yet deep down, they knew something unnatural had invaded their community. A few days later, as the farmers went about their daily routine, the atmosphere grew heavier, suffocated by an unshakable dread. Jake Morris, a young farmer known for his bravado, scoffed at the tales of wild beasts. He was determined to work through the noise of his combine harvester, a machine that roared to life as it tore through rows of corn. The sun hung high in the sky, but there was an eerie quiet surrounding him as he drove the machine. As the combine engine echoed across the fields, the sensation of being watched prickled Jake's skin. He shrugged it off, focusing on the task at hand, but the unsettling feeling grew more profound, and as he turned to check his surroundings, a sudden screech pierced the air, sending chills down his spine. He caught a glimpse of something darting between the corn stalks, an eerie flash of fur and eyes. Jake's heart raced as he returned to the cab of the combine, fingers trembling over the controls. The machine's engine roared, drowning out the distant sounds of nature, and he pressed the throttle down hard. Suddenly, the ground beneath the machine trembled, and the combine lurched to a stop, grinding to a halt as something crashed against its side. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw it, a bobcat, its eyes glinting with a predatory hunger. It lunged at the window, teeth bared, snarling ferociously. Jake slammed the gears into reverse, but the ground was wet from a recent rain, and he lost traction. Before he could react, the bobcat lunged again, its claws tearing through the door and raking across his arm. Pain shot through him as he screamed and swatted at the creature, desperately trying to fend it off. In a panic, he finally managed to throw the combine into reverse, crashing backwards and sending the bobcat sprawling. He looked on in disbelief as it writhed in the mud, momentarily stunned. But as soon as it regained its footing, it charged again, an unrelenting fury in its eyes. Jake escaped, stumbling out of the cab and running towards the nearest farmhouse. As he fled, he could hear the unmistakable sounds of more bobcats joining the fray, their terrifying howls mixing with the roar of his machinery. It was a nightmarish cacophony, but what frightened him most was that the howls seemed to echo from all directions. As he reached the safety of the farmhouse, breathless and terrified, Jake slammed the door shut behind him. His heart raced as he sank to the floor, clutching his bleeding arm. The town was falling apart, and there was no one to blame but the very creatures they once revered as mere shadows in the fields. June 12th marked another dark day for Princeton. The news had spread like wildfire. Multiple farmers had been attacked by bobcats, each incident more gruesome than the last. Those who managed to escape spoke of the creatures moving in packs, their eyes glowing like embers in the night, as if they were being controlled by some malevolent force. The sheriff's department scrambled to respond, but answers were elusive. Dr. Karen Blake, the local veterinarian, examined the injured survivors and discovered signs of unusual behavior in the bobcats. Their eyes glinted with a feverish intensity, and their movements were unnaturally coordinated. But it was as if they were acting on a primal instinct, driven by something beyond their natural predatory nature. The authorities convened an emergency meeting where they hastily concocted a narrative to calm the frightened township. It appears that the rabid bobcats have infiltrated our community, Sheriff Reynolds announced, a strained calm in his voice. These animals pose a threat, and we are taking immediate action. But the truth was darker than anyone could admit. The rabies theory was a convenient scapegoat, a way to shield the townspeople from the horrifying reality that something had driven the bobcats to act with a collective fury, to hunt as a pack with a single terrifying purpose. As the days passed, fear tightened its grip on Princeton. The farmers barricaded their homes and avoided venturing out after sunset. The once vibrant fields became hauntingly quiet, filled only with the echoes of machinery that now felt like an unwelcome intrusion. On the evening of June the 20th, a full moon hung low in the sky, casting a silver sheen over the fields. The townspeople huddled together in their homes. Whispers of the bobcats permeated every conversation. Just when they thought it couldn't get worse, a shrill scream broke Maggie Winters, a local school teacher who had ventured out to check on her farm. The town folks rushed to her aid, hearts racing as they ran towards her property. When they arrived, they found Maggie crumpled on the ground, her body trembling in shock. She pointed towards the barn, her face pale with terror. "They came out of nowhere," she cried. There were dozens of them. As they followed her trembling finger, they were met with a sight that would haunt them forever. A pack of bobcats surrounded the barn, their eyes glowing like shards of glass, as if the moon had ignited something unnatural within them. The creatures were in a frenzy, darting around the structure with a wild intensity, their snarls mixing into a cacophony that chilled the blood. Sheriff Reynolds felt the weight of the dread settle on his shoulders. The rumors had transformed from whispers of rabies to something more sinister, something that defied explanation. As he called for backup, he realized he could no longer protect his community with half-truths. There was an evil lurking in the shadows, one that preyed upon the fears and vulnerabilities of the town. The following day, the sheriff organized a hunt, rallying volunteers to confront the threat. Armed with rifles and flashlights, the townfolk marched into the fields, their spirits buoyed by the sense of unity against the menace. But as night fell, they found themselves ensnared in a battle against an unseen enemy. The hunt began at twilight, but the bobcats seemed to vanish, their stealthy forms blending into the shadows. Minutes turned into hours, and despair began to seep into their hearts. Just when they thought it was over, a haunting chorus of growls erupted from the trees, echoing through the night air. Before they could react, the pack descended upon them, eyes glowing with an unnatural ferocity. The bobcats attacked with coordinated precision, as if driven by a single malevolent will. The chaos that ensued was nothing short of a nightmare, screams piercing the air. The shadows danced around them in a frenzy of fur and teeth. When dawn broke over Princeton, the once vibrant town lay in ruins, its fields soaked in blood. The sheriff's office was overran, and the town folk scattered, some finding refuge in nearby shelters, while others fled to neighboring communities, haunted by the terror they could not escape. As for the bobcats, they returned to the shadows, their eyes forever glowing with a darkness that left a mark on the land. The rabies theory persisted, a hollow explanation for the horrors that unfolded, but those who survived knew better. They spoke of the creatures with a reverence laced with fear, whispering stories that would echo in the annals of Princeton's history. In a secluded valley cradled by the towering mountains and dense forests lay the village of Oakwood. This tranquil settlement thrived on the abundance of the earth, where the villagers cultivated lush fields of crops and tended to their livestock. Each year, as the harvest moon illuminated the night sky with its silvery glow, the villagers celebrated their bounty, giving thanks to the spirit of the land. But this year, as the harvest approached, an unsettling tension hung in the air. The crops were wilting, the animals were restless, and a strange hunger began to seep into the hearts of the villagers. Whispers of an ancient spirit, the spirit of hunger, spread like wildfire, filling the once joyous community with fear and apprehension. The elders spoke of the spirit of hunger, a being that roamed the earth, devouring the essence of life. It was said that the spirit fed on greed and excess, growing stronger as the people took more than they needed. If not appeased, it would unleash a devastating famine upon the land. As the days grew shorter and the nights colder, the villagers of Oakwood prepared their annual harvest festival. Yet despite their best efforts, the crops continued to wither. Each day they would rise with the sun, toiled in the fields, but the fruits of their labor were scarce. Amidst this turmoil, a young woman named Aisling, known for her wisdom and compassion, felt a stirring within her soul. She sensed the presence of the spirit of hunger lurking in the shadows, waiting for the villagers to falter in their unity. As Aisling wandered through the village, she noticed the changes in her neighbors. Their faces were gaunt, their eyes, once filled with warmth, now reflected despair. The spirit thrived on this suffering, feeding off of the fear and desperation that had taken root in their hearts. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the village, Aisling gathered the villagers by the central fire. "We must remember our bond with the earth," she urged, her voice steady. "We must share what we have, for only in unity can we overcome the darkness that threatens us." Despite her efforts, the villagers were skeptical. "How can we share when we have so little?" one villager protested, his eyes filled with worry. "We must focus on our own survival." As the festival grew near, the village remained divided. The spirits of hunger continued to loom over them, its power growing stronger with every passing day. The crops had all but failed, and the villagers were left with little more than the cloths on their back. In the depths of despair, a few villagers, blinded by their desperation, made a fateful decision. They gathered in secret, conspiring to hoard what little food remained, believing that if they secured their own survival, they could weather the storm. Unbeknownst to them, their actions would only strengthen the spirit of hunger. As they hoarded their supplies, the spirit grew bolder, its presence suffusing the villages with an air of dread. Shadows danced at the edge of their vision, and the insatiable gnawing echoed in their minds, a constant reminder of the spirit's influence. As the harvest festival approached, the air crackled with tension. The villagers were on edge. Their fear. The villagers were on edge, their fear palpable. Aisling, sensing the imminent threat, resolved to confront the spirit of hunger before it could unleash its wrath. That night, Aisling ventured into the woods, seeking guidance from the ancient spirits that watched over the land. She followed the winding path to a sacred clearing, illuminated by the light of the harvest moon. There she knelt before the altar, offering her prayers to the spirits. "Great spirits of the earth, I beseech you," she implored, her voice trembling. "Guide me in our time of need. Show us the way to restore balance and banish the spirit of hunger." As she finished her prayer, a gentle breeze swept through the clearing, carrying with it the faint whisper of the spirits. Aisling felt a surge of hope, a reminder that unity and compassion were the keys to overcoming the darkness. On the eve of the harvest festival, Aisling returned to the village, determined to share her newfound wisdom. She gathered the villagers around the central fire, urging them to put aside their fears and join together in celebration. "Let us honor the earth and the spirits that sustain us," she declared, her voice ringing with conviction. "We must share our blessings, for only then can we overcome the darkness that threatens to consume us." The villagers hesitated, uncertainty etched in their faces, but as Aisling spoke, a flicker of hope ignited within them. They began to remember the strength of their community, the love that had bound them together for generations. As night fell, they prepared a feast, laying out what little food they had. Each villager contributed what they could, sharing the last remnants of their supplies. The air filled with the aroma of baked bread, roasted vegetables, and hearty stews, a testament to their unity. As the festival began, laughter and music filled the air. The villagers danced around the fire, their spirits lifted by the warmth of the community. But as they celebrated, the spirit of hunger watched from the shadows, its hunger intensifying. With each joyous cheer, the spirit grew angrier, feeding off the villagers' defiance. As the night wore on, dark clouds gathered overhead, blotting out the moonlight. The atmosphere shifted, and a chilling wind swept through the village, silencing the laughter. Suddenly the ground trembled beneath their feet, and a low growl echoed through the night. The spirit of hunger manifested before them, a grotesque figure with hollow eyes and a gaping maw that seemed to devour the very light around it. "You dare to celebrate when I exist," the spirit roared, its voice a cacophony of despair. "I will consume you all." Fear gripped the villagers as they confronted the spirit of hunger. Aisling, undeterred by the chaos around her, stepped forward. "We will not be ruled by you," she shouted, her voice ringing with defiance. We choose to stand together in unity." In that declaration, the villagers rallied behind her, their spirits ignited by the power of community. They formed a circle around the fire, holding hands and channeling their energy into a collective force. Aisling led them in a chant, invoking the spirits of the earth to protect them. As the villagers united, the spirit of hunger recoiled, its form flickering with uncertainty. The warmth of their love and the strength of their unity began to push back against the darkness that surrounded them. "You think your bonds can defeat me?" the spirit hissed, its voice laced with venom. "I am hunger personified. I will not be cast aside." But the villagers stood firm, their resolve unwavering. Aisling focused on the light within each of them, channeling their collective strength into a radiant beam that pierced the darkness. The light surged forward, enveloping the spirit of hunger in its warm embrace. As the villagers sang in unison, the spirit howled in agony, its form twisted and writhing. The light grew brighter, illuminating the village with a golden glow. With one final surge of energy, the villagers pushed the spirit back, banishing it into the shadows from which it came. With the spirit vanquished, the clouds parted, and the moon shone brightly over the village once more. The villagers erupted in cheer, their hearts filled with relief and gratitude. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, united in their love for one another and their commitment to the land.